Right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming along and joining us on our webinar to talk about our Komatsu GS360 stabilizer incident that resulted in an enforceable undertaking that we entered into with WorkSafe. So I'm going to kick off now. To start, I'd like to really extend our thanks and gratitude to Civil Contractors New Zealand. They've been really helpful and instrumental in helping us pull the webinar together, providing an opportunity to access their members so that we can share our learnings of this incident with you. They have published the safety alert that we produced on their website, and the address is up on the screen there for you. And hopefully, from the learnings that we've taken away from this, the wider and broader industry will certainly be able to apply some of those in the context of the work that you all do. Today, your facilitators and presenters are myself, Mark Dexter. I'm with the Hiway Group, General Manager for Health, Safety and Quality. A logo and a label that you might be more familiar with is the Hiway Stabilizers, which is on all of our vehicles out on the road. I'm joined by Elliot Newton, who's the co-founder of Cortical. And Cortical and Elliot were instrumental in helping us pull together our virtual reality or VR program that we developed as a result of the work we did in trying to improve training and learning outcomes for staff. So talking a little bit about the Komatsu GS360 stabilizer, Hiways operates a fleet of these vehicles. We've got them both here in New Zealand and in Australia. It's a vehicle or a machine that was built by Komatsu in the 1990s. It certainly served us very well. The Australian teams refer to it as a graderlizer because for the most part, it does look very much like a grader, except for the blade, you've got a large rotor assembly in place. And that rotor assembly is really the business end of the stabilizer. It has a unique feature to it in that the rotor is able to side shift both left and right. And being able to side shift like that means that we can place the stabilizer on a firm surface, extend the rotor out to the left or to the right by about half a meter, and then stabilize a soft edge or along the shoulder of a road. We typically use the Komatsus in a roading application in sense. And typically what that means is on a sealed road surface or unsealed surface, we will spread a binder material down, and that binder material will then be what we call slaking, and that's just really the addition of water onto that material. It then reacts, produces a bit of steam, as you can see in the photograph on the screen there. The stabilizer will then drive over that material and lower the rotor assembly down onto the ground. And then the insert photograph there shows you all the picks and teeth that really then mill straight through that road surface and reprocess the existing road surface back into the underlying material. And in so doing, behind the stabilizer provides a homogeneous mix of binder and the existing material that's in place, where a roller will then compact that, or a grader will come in and contour it and shape it for the road profile. And then another contractor not related to Hiways will come along and then place a sealed surface on the road. And that really is the extent of our involvement in terms of the overall project for a road. Is just really stabilizing the existing in situ material that's present. And each rotor is covered with a set of tips, as we refer to them. They can be or are referred to sometimes in the industry as GETs, or ground engaging tools. And the rotor drum has a series of these spread right across it. The rotor, in terms of its overall dimensions, is around 2 meters wide, has a diameter of about 1.2 meters as well. So just talking a little bit about the rotor design and some of the hazards associated with that. The rotor drive mechanism, it's chain driven, and the chains are driven inside of that enclosed oval box that's attached to the rotor drive. And that entire mechanism is powered by a hydraulic pump. And there's two pumps, one on each side of the rotor assembly. And the rotor pumps are driven by a hydraulic engine, which is powered by the engine of the stabilizer itself. And in operation, the rotor drive mechanism will descend into the void, where you can see an arrow pointing in the topmost picture. Where there's a void, you can see the rotor through that void, and the rotor drive will drop down into that space and occupy that space as it descends down into the ground and through the road surface. And the cut depth is anywhere up to 300 to 350 millimeters. And once it's descended down into that open space or that void disappears. Now, typically, when the rotor or the machine is operated, the rotor is not turning or spinning when the rotor is in the up position, as in the top picture, and the rotor skids are off the ground. That's usually just for travel and transit. Once it's in position and ready to start work, the rotor is energized and then immediately descends down into the ground, and the rotor void disappears and it commences working. Now, typically in the operations that we use it in, there is no one in the vicinity of the stabilizer. It's working on a busy public road. We have one lane where we're working in, and the adjacent lane is then occupied by traffic. So there's no need to have anybody in the vicinity of the machine or around the machine when working. Now, the rotor design in the Komatsu GS360, although it's a machine that was made in the 1990s, is certainly not unique at all. The top left picture is a Wirtgen German-made tractor-towed stabilizing unit in white behind it, that big white square box. And again, the U-shaped grey area is really the rotor void, where the rotor drive mechanism would descend down and into that void. Below that is an XCMG stabilizer, and the XCMG is a Chinese-made machine. Again, similar principle of operation for the rotor, and there's a void directly below the rotor drive system. The BOMAG on the top right of the screen is a German-made machine. Again, you can see the rotor void in that place as well. And below that is a recent photograph from a recent publication of a new machine. It's a Italian-made Tesmec used in quarrying and mining applications to mill off or take off the top layer that can be transported away for other disposal place use in a crusher. And that's a completely exposed rotor that's turning and being pulled through the soil surface as it's milling away and removing material. So the application of these types of machines are in common use at the moment and available on the market in that format. Now, in terms of the incident that happened at Hiways, this occurred in December of 2019. And on this particular day, the worker had completed work for the day. It started at around 8 in the morning. It had taken him about an hour to stabilize 185 meters of road, fairly small or short area to be stabilized. And once he had actually done the stabilizing work, he had done 3 cuts on that. He then drove the stabilizer to a park-up area, and he parked the stabilizer. He then opened the back tailgate, and then, in terms of our procedures, should have then shut the machine down, climbed down the steps just in front of the wheel to the right where the photographer is crouched. And once down on the ground, there are 2 isolation switches. Now, those isolation switches isolate either the battery or the starter motor. Now, our procedures were required to turn both of those off. That means the rotor cannot be energized, and the rotor cannot be energized because the engine cannot be started, and therefore the hydraulic pumps cannot be driven. The hydraulic pumps are not electrically driven at all on the stabilizer. And once isolated, crouching down next to the wheel where the photographer is, his line of sight would have been the rotor and the tips themselves. Now, what he's looking for there is for damaged tips. But given that this was a fairly small run that he was doing, it was highly unlikely that any of the tips would have been damaged. But this particular worker was very conscientious and wanted to make sure that at the end of the day he wasn't leaving any tips on the rotor assembly that may have been damaged. Now, in doing this, he did not isolate the machine. Once he had parked it up, he left it running, that's the engine, and then placed the rotor into a very slow idle. The rotor was turning over very, very slowly. He then climbed down the steps, crouching down, looking in to the rotor area from photographer's position. He could then view the rotor as it turned past his field of view and view all the tips as they swung by. In doing so, he found that none of the tips were damaged, and he then proceeded on to the next step of what the activity should be for shut down and park up of the rotor. And that is to have a look at the skid and check that the skid itself hasn't got an accumulation of debris. Now, usually when the machine runs and operates, a bit of material will be ejected out of the rotor void. That ejection of material accumulates along the skid as depicted in that photograph there. And you can see the U shape in the material, and that's where the rotor drive mechanism would have been resting when this was operated and the material is accumulated. Now, ordinarily, the operators have a spade and a cleaning tool that's available in the cab of the Komatsu, and that's just to knock off the debris. But at that stage, the rotor should not be turning. However, remember, he's left the rotor idling over very, very slowly. He hasn't used a tool. What he's done, he's used his boot to kick at the dirt that's accumulated along that skid. And as he's kicked at the dirt to knock the dirt off the skid, and the reason the dirt is knocked off the skid is that during transport, we cannot have the material lying on the skids because heading down the road and along the motorway, this material will be falling off, damaging cars, and it's clearly irresponsible to do so. So we require our operators to knock that material off. So this operator on this occasion has kicked at it with his boot, and he missed the skid in the dirt that was accumulated there. And in the lower picture where the tape measure is, his foot's gone in towards the left area of the rotor assembly. And when his boot's entered into that point, the rotor has come past. It's jammed his boot in there, and he's been struggling to pull the boot out. But what the rotor is fitted with is side cutters, and in the middle of that photograph is a silver vertical tip, and that's come past, caught his boot, and then slowly started to pull his boot and foot into the rotor assembly along with his leg. Now, unfortunately, in this case, as you can imagine, it's been a traumatic injury to his leg that he suffered, and he was taken to hospital as a result, which necessitated the amputation of his leg mid-thigh. The worker in this particular case has gone on to make a remarkable recovery. In this case, he's running his own business at the moment. He's competed in the Paralympics and will be going back for further events in the Paralympics as well, and is doing remarkably well, I'm very pleased to say. Now, following on from the incident, we had a look at the rotor assembly to see what further safety improvements we could make to it. Our reliance was on operators to isolate, shut the machine down, and only approach or access the rotor when isolated. It's a difficult machine to place a guard on, in that the rotor drive mechanism has to move up and down to lower the rotor into the soil below or through the road surface when stabilizing. It also ejects material out of the open void, and we can't have an accumulation of material behind the guard. The guard is also subject to a lot of abrasion and resistance as it passes through soil, past soil, and can be buckled or damaged and bent, further jamming the overall operation of the rotor drive mechanism as well. But our operations team, along with our engineering workshop, got together, and after some considerable effort and work, managed to develop a guard that fits onto the side of the rotor. Now, this fits on both sides, both the left and right side of the rotor housing. And in photograph 1 on the screen there, there's a picture showing the guard that we managed to develop as a result. Now, it allows the rotor drive mechanism to move freely behind the guard. Dirt and material don't accumulate, and if anything does, we've got a cleaning rod that's able to reach in there and remove any material. The void remains, but anybody trying to reach the void with their hand by putting their hand behind the guard simply can't get it all the way down to the open void. So completely isolates that guard, or that void rather, from any access with the guard in place. And the guard can only be removed in our engineering workshops. In addition to the guard, in photograph 2, we fitted an angled plate to the skid. Now, the angled plate to the skid helps material slide off the skid and prevents the accumulation of material that would ordinarily sit on a flat surface. And it also facilitates cleaning for our operators on site. We went further as well and had a look at the drive mechanism. Now, what happens to the rotor assembly, it will not turn unless the engine is running, or the hydraulics are energized. When the engine is off and isolated, the hydraulics lock. So in photograph 4 there, we fitted a hydraulic bypass valve. What that enables us to do is to turn the rotor now and overcome that hydraulic lock that is ordinarily in place. We then went along and fitted a crank or keyway into the drive system so that we can fit a crank very much like you would see in some of those very old Model T Fords where you crank the engine over to start it. A crank fits into that keyway, and then the operator is able to use that crank to turn the rotor assembly over, because we've now overcome the hydraulic lock by turning the valve. So that means we can now manually turn the rotor over to examine it for any tips that might need to be replaced and repaired as a result of the work it's done. So those safety improvements have meant that there is absolutely no need for anyone to operate an energized rotor in any way, and also no one can actually access that part of the machine should it be left running for any reason at all. One of the things that we had been doing with all of our operators prior to this event, and we've certainly continued on post the event, is, as most companies have, a raft of safe working procedures and procedures to train operators in. We also did detailed plant risk assessments, and both of those procedures and risk assessments included entanglement and entrapment in the rotor, and it was recognized as a risk early on. We also did detailed plant competency training with our operators. So an experienced supervisor would take the operator out to the machine and applying the safe working procedures and plant risk assessment principles, including isolation, would assess them as competent to operate that machine. In addition, we had developed over time various programs. One of those was Hiway Safe, which was an improvement roadmap and a cultural training program, which we did way back in 2014. We've done situational awareness training and managing variability. So when change occurs on the job site, how do we respond to that and respond safely to that? And we've also done a lot of work around supervisor development skills. And recently we've done work around effective communication. But this incident, and prior to this incident, we had recognized that, training employees in your typical formats, whether it's standing around a machine and talking about it, or in your training environment with perhaps a PowerPoint or a conversation, that we were still missing some key learning opportunities there and being able to demonstrate to staff, what was the consequence of a bad decision or poor decision? How do you learn by doing? And clearly our operators learn better by doing, and it facilitates learning certainly in the context and the formats that we try and offer. So one of the cornerstones that we developed in our Enforceable Undertaking was a virtual reality training program. And Cortical and Elliot have been instrumental, as I mentioned earlier, in helping us develop that training program. And Elliot's going to talk to you a bit more about that journey that we've been on with them in terms of the development of our training. Elliot.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and hi, everyone. As Mark mentioned, we got together earlier in the year and we had the opportunity to work with Hiways and understand what they're trying to do in the VR space. I'll give you a little bit of an overview of who we are and what we do, and I want to share with you a bit more about virtual reality as a technology as well, and some of the areas that are being used. It's probably not something that's new to you guys, but virtual reality has actually been around for 35 years, and the military and surgeons have been using it to train for a number of years, and pilots also. However, as we probably have all have heard in the recent years with the metaverse and Facebook changing their name to Meta, it's starting to become a bit more prevalent. And certainly in the business and commercial circles, we're seeing a huge amount of uptake in the L&D and training space with virtual reality. So I'll go into a bit more detail about why you would use it, where you would use it, and some of the areas that we worked with Hiways on this project. Look, Cortical, just quickly on us, we're based in Christchurch. We're a virtual reality development company. We specialize in learning and training experiences. They're gamified learning, and to Mark's point around knowledge retention and trying to get some messaging through to people that learn hands-on. It's an amazing new tool that's now available, and there's a lot of spaces that it's being used, and I will now share with you some of that. Yeah, one of the key areas of virtual reality is great power to hold onto the knowledge and the learnings that we're training our people on. The previous methodology around reading, writing, in recent years we've come to use lots of audio visual and group discussions and things like that. And look, they're still going to be part of the curriculums, but what we now have access to with VR is really immersive and effective training by doing. And like we all probably can testify to, most of the population learns best by doing, kinetic learning. It's not to say, though, that it's replacing everything, and it's certainly the case with Hiways. As Mark showed you, there's still lots of other things that Hiways are putting in place and extending their training and learning programs. It should be seen as an additional resource in your training curriculum. You're still going to have your face-to-face operators who are the experts teaching and training your people. You're still going to deliver your online courses if you have any e-learning in your business or your operations. Those are still really valuable resources. So it's really important to understand that VR isn't here to replace those things. It's there to complement them and fill a gap where it wasn't previously had. What it can be used for, and specifically why Hiways had chosen to go down the VR road, is it's really effective in the safety and hazardous training space. Scenarios that are very difficult, expensive, dangerous, or just hard to practice in reality. If you can imagine putting out a fire or climbing a 50-story building, those things are incredibly difficult to do in real life and very risky. You could pop on a headset right now and experience all of those visceral feelings quite easily in VR. Now, it's not a new technology, but it's certainly becoming a lot more studied and a lot more prevalent. And the likes of PwC and a few other organizations around the globe are starting to really tap into this and do some data analysis of why it's such a great piece of technology to start incorporating. And I really like the stat of that 275%. That's the one that stands out for me. The confidence to apply the skills that you've been taught in a training session, that for me is the key metric, right? it's all well and good sitting in a classroom or practicing some training that you're being delivered or you're being taught, sorry. But if you don't have the confidence to apply that training in a real scenario when it really matters, then that training is, null and void. And that's what VR is so good at doing. You can put a headset on, you can jump into a really specific and relevant scenario to you and practice and practice and practice until you're really confident and comfortable with what you're being asked to do. So there's probably maybe a few of you guys would have looked into of some things spring to mind when you look at VR. And those are probably the ones on the left-hand side, or it depends on your screen orientation, the hard skills. And this is obviously what we're talking about with the Hiways project and what we put into their development courses. The heights, ladders, machine operation, in this case, fire extinguisher, first aid, those types of tangible hard skills that we're trying to access and train those motor skills in. Now, that's probably the low-hanging fruit. There's also another side to the equation where this is going to be a new area where you can train your people with soft skills. And this is actually a space where a lot of the overseas and America specifically are putting a lot of resources into. De-escalation and conflict training in the workplace. Obviously, frontline workers are now, they're getting bombarded with post-COVID. Lots of people are stressed and short-tempered, and how to deal with dangerous situations. It doesn't have to be as extreme as that, though. It can be as simple as communication and sales or leadership. Most of the people in this room are either leaders or senior leaders in businesses. Now, if you could imagine being able to practice a difficult conversation with an employee or a contractor, you can pre-rehearse and do a lot of that work inside an extremely hyper-realistic scenario in VR. Most of us have done the good old role plays and some of those good old sales trainings and leadership trainings over the years. I know I have, and it's a little bit awkward and we get it done, but did we actually get much out of it, or did we take anything with us? Probably, a little bit. But can we go away and then practice and practice and practice those skills? The answer was no. And luckily, what we can now see is some of these things being available with a simple virtual reality headset. Yeah, I like what Tim Cook at Apple said, right? And COVID has shifted a lot of the workplace now to more of a workspace. This is testament to what I'm doing right now. I'm working from my home. I think a lot of us will be hybrid workers or remote workers now. And that's the way the business world is going. It's been accelerated by COVID, but it was always going that way. And what does that mean for your remote workforce? Why should they miss out on some quality training that can only be done in person previous to VR coming along? Also, was it the most efficient way to train your people? Was it really the best way to get big groups of senior leaders or middle management all out at once to do a day's training with some coaching, or some experts come in and do some face-to-face training? Is that actually the best use of that time? And also, why should the leaders of companies, why should only the top few get access to the quality training that was previously available? And the obvious answer is it's cost and time, right? We can't train everybody and anybody to that standard. But what we can do is now start giving access to somebody like a warehouse worker or a machine operator at leadership, communication, all these soft skills that are critical and arguably just as important, if not more important, to the modern workforce. They can now be taught and trained just as much as your senior C-suite or senior leadership team. Another one of the beautiful benefits about VR is multiple languages. New Zealand's a very diverse workplace, a very diverse country now. And it's not just English speakers that have have part of our workforce. So there's no reason why you can't include, multiple languages: Te Reo, Filipino, Hindi, Samoan, Tongan, you name it, Mandarin. We've done lots of projects that have incorporated multiple languages where a simple click of the button and now your people are now learning in their native language. And obviously they're going to absorb and retain some of that critical safety information that you're trying to get through to them. And it's incredibly easy and relatively cheap and efficient to do that in virtual reality, opposed to getting a translator in or somebody that speaks multiple languages in real life. So everything up until now, everything I've spoke to you about is revolving around the headset and the training, and obviously why virtual reality is such a powerful technology. Now, that's only half the piece of the puzzle. And certainly in the Hiway's example, and where we've worked with one of their suppliers, their health and safety software provider called Assura, some of you may have heard of them, we are tapping all of the training data all into Hiway's existing health and safety software. So now all of a sudden, your training and learning experiences, which up until now have been pretty standalone, there's not too many ways to capture the data apart from, has somebody done the training, yes or no? Have they passed, fail or pass? It's very binary. Now we can start tapping into some of the benefits of this technology. Things like decision-making times. How quickly or slowly are people reacting? Where are their eye movements, and tracking what they're looking at and what they're not looking at in terms of safety? What are they observing? Are they fully situationally aware? Hazard ID is a great module for that. So this data is allowing us to show Hiways not just has someone done their operation training, but how well they performed. And if there's some areas that they haven't performed well in, Hiways can then go into their software and understand that at an employee level, and maybe tap that employee on the shoulder and go, hey mate, you did your VR training last week. You did really well, but there was a few areas that would love to work with you a bit more on. Can you come and have another go? And I want to give you some more individual training. That's really hard to do without having the data insights. And the Assura team, the Hiways team, and ourselves have all collaborated, so they have that data at their fingertips. This is a web-based dashboard, and this is a quick example of some of the metrics that you can start seeing from these sessions. And especially if you're a company that has multiple locations, both nationally and internationally, like Hiways, Mark or his team can sit at head office in Auckland and see all of their training performance, who's done it, who hasn't done it, who's overdue, what the trend is from last month as a company or specific regions. These are the data insights that we can start showing and sharing with senior leaders, and you guys can now start making decisions based off this data. I wanted to show you this one. This is a quick insight. It's actually a GIF that's not working on these slides, but this is a heat map. And what you'd traditionally be seeing is this is tracking somebody's eye gaze. So in the virtual reality headsets, they have inbuilt retina sensors, and it's literally tracking where your gaze is going in a training session. And this is one of our hazard identification modules. And unfortunately, this was an example where the trainee hadn't said any of these but around that. So yeah, what we're getting from there is measurable insights, and that's what we wanted to touch on. The importance of reporting and understanding what your training is doing and how it's affecting your company is really, really important. And previous to VR, it would have been quite a challenge. So yeah, what we do lots of things. Hiways has been an absolute great partner for us, and we've really enjoyed this project. Anything in the training and learning space, we're comfortable doing. Is that video now, Mark? There we go. And this is a quick video on the
project.
For the purpose of this exercise, assume the immediate area is safe. You have a clear work area and the terrain is solid and reliable. To get started, bring up the tablet and mark the operation area as safe. It looks like you performed a check without isolating or making the vehicle safe. This is a critical safety failure and could have resulted in serious injury or even death if performed on a real Komatsu GS360. The module will now restart. This time, make sure you follow the correct isolation and safety procedures before you conduct your pre-start checks. Alright, let's give it another go. You'll now demonstrate how to identify and service damaged or worn rotor tips. Be aware that in its current state, the machine may not be isolated.
Right, so there's a good example of the program that we've actually pulled together along with Elliot and Cortical for our stabilizers, and really looking forward to launching that in November and getting our operators trained and taking them through the VR environment. The feedback that we're getting at the moment from those that have been involved in the trials and the development of that has been absolutely positive and really encouraging. And I certainly see virtual reality, I think, playing a key role at Highways in terms of how we train our employees to operate machinery, how to do so safely. It puts them in an environment that is quite safe. They can make a mistake and learn from those mistakes. And again, the virtual reality program and environment really imitates in incredible detail the machine itself, our training room, our training environment, in fact, our work environment as well. So it's going to be a great program, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the fruits of that rolling through. And there's potential there to then start to expand those programs to include other machines and equipment as well. So some really exciting training opportunities lie ahead for us as a result of this. There are some questions I see that some of the participants have, and one of those is, from a fleet point of view, has the company considered any of the other stabilizers other than just the Komatsus? And the answer to that is certainly we have. We've looked at all of our stabilizers, not just the Komatsus, and then applied similar or the same types of guarding solutions that we developed for the Komatsu. And they've been very successful in those applications as well.
Yeah, I've also got a question here about headsets. The virtual reality headsets, look, they can range in price, but the sort of the middle tier commercial headset that Hiways are using is called the Quest 2, and that's 600 New Zealand dollars. But to give you some context, the ones that surgeons use to practice surgery on us, they can range anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000. So it really depends on sort of what you're using them for, and certainly the hardware is rapidly evolving. The likes of Meta, Google, and Microsoft, and some of these big tech giants, a lot of them are focusing on virtual and augmented reality, as you can probably be aware. So each year there's new headsets that are coming out, but also the price point is dropping. So it's relatively an affordable tool now. It's less than it's less than an iPhone. It's less than some laptops. So we're not talking mega bucks to start using virtual reality as a tool now.
I've got a question there. If any thought has been given to those who witnessed the incident or accident at the time, in terms of what we're offering from a training point of view. The worker in this particular case was working alongside another contractor who was doing the grading and rolling of the road. It wasn't our employees that were there. So what we have done, though, is we've gone out to other users of Komatsus and stabilizing equipment, and we will be offering them access to what we've done from a VR point of view, should they wish to take up the opportunity and utilize VR in their environments as well. And we did certainly talk to those and support those people that were involved or witnessed the accident, and supported this worker while emergency services were on the way to help him. Have we approached Komatsu to modify these machines? These machines are no longer in being manufactured by Komatsu at all. We certainly have made the information available to all of those users of these types of machines, and there are at least 2 other users of these machines in New Zealand, and we've provided them with all of the drawings and dimensions and information necessary for them to emulate what we've done and the improvements that we have made.
The project, a question here was, how long has the project taken? We started working on the development in February this year. So what's that, about 8 months from start to finish to delivery. And there's been milestones and things in between that we've delivered to Hiways to get their feedback on. But yeah, the project itself, and as you saw from that quick video, there was a lot of granular detail and machine operation that we had to develop and get realistic. Obviously, with the safety and training module, having realistic interactions and very close to the real thing is extremely important. So we spent a lot of time in our development team read through Komatsu manuals and a lot of information that we get our hands on to get as close as we can to the real thing. And I think testament to that is some of the operators' feedback that Mark gets has been that they're absolutely blown away by the detail that you can do.
Yeah, I think that's certainly one of the first comments when they take the headset off is, wow, that was so realistic. It's when you stand next to the machine is proportionate in terms of its height. So that gives operators straight away some familiarity with the machine. The function of the levers, when you pull the lever, you will see the wheels tilt, the rotor assembly will move left and right or up and down. So those activities that you would ordinarily see when pulling levers or using the machine do in fact occur in the virtual environment as well, which just adds to the realism. And I think that then helps drive training and understanding and learning as well. And operators' feedback and development of this has been really instrumental in helping us make those improvements, just which the particular nuances around particular levers and what they actually do on the machine and how the machine responds. that's all emulated in the VR environment, which has been terrific to see. What we will be doing with this webinar is we will make it available. It'll be online. CCNZ has very kindly offered to host this on their YouTube channel. So once we have that link, I'll certainly circulate it to all of the participants or those that registered to attend. If you wish to go ahead and view this the video and view the presentation again in the webinar, you can certainly do so as well. It's just a point made here that, just about the VR training and perhaps a coordinated approach, in developing training modules for common equipment. There's a number of businesses that certainly would probably benefit from that. That's I suppose the question is just time and cost that would have to be worked through. But again, standard industry training in terms of the common equipment, excavators and other machines that we use on site on a regular basis. Those programs would be applicable across quite a broad segment of the industry and members of CCNZ as well, I imagine. Looks like we are just about nearing the end of the session. I don't see any more questions coming up. Look, if you do have any questions or anything you'd like to clarify or speak to us about, please do feel free to contact me directly. My email address is markd@hiways.co.nz. I'd be more than happy to correspond with you and answer any of your questions. And as I said, this presentation will be available for you online, and as soon as it is, I'll let everyone know. And I'd like to thank you all for taking the time out of your busy days to attend. I trust you managed to take something away from this and benefit from some of the learnings that we made as well.
Thanks, team.
Yeah, well, thank you, everyone. We'll end it there. Thank you.